A young couple vanished immediately after their wedding in 1985, as if they had simply driven off into thin air with their brand new car. But 12 years later, university students analyzing old satellite images spotted something shocking in the Everglades, a discovery that would lead investigators to a disturbing revelation no one saw coming. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Walmart parking lot in Homestead, Florida. Linda Carroll pushed her shopping cart through the produce section, methodically selecting tomatoes and examining lettuce heads. At 56, she had developed routines that helped fill the empty spaces in her life spaces that had gaped wide since that summer day in 1985 when her only daughter vanished. The shrill ring of her cell phone, still a relatively new possession in 1997 that she had won from a supermarket lottery, startled her from her thoughts. She fumbled in her purse, nearly dropping a bag of oranges. "Hello, Senora and Carol. This is Detective Jason Prome from the Homestead Police Department. I need to ask where you are right now." Linda's heart skipped. In 12 years, she'd received countless calls that led nowhere, but something in the detective's tone made her grip the phone tighter. "I'm at Walmart doing my grocery shopping. Why? What's happened?" "Mrs. Carroll, we need you to come to Everglades National Park. Something related to your daughter Melissa and her husband Brandon has just resurfaced." The words hit her like a physical blow. The phone nearly slipped from her, suddenly nerveless. "Fingers, what is it? What have you found?" "We've recovered the yellow Ford Thunderbird from the Everglades. We need you for identification purposes. We've also contacted the Whitmore family. Can you meet us at the park parking lot via Main Park Road, the car?" After all this time, Linda's voice cracked. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Without a second thought, she abandoned her half-filled cart in the middle of the aisle. Other shoppers stared as she rushed past, but Linda barely noticed. Her mind raced as she hurried to her aging Honda Civic. The 20-minute drive to Everglades National Park felt both endless and too brief. As she navigated Main Park Road, memories flooded back, memories she'd tried so hard to reconcile over the years. The police had concluded that Melissa had left town voluntarily with Brandon after their wedding. It was the only reasonable explanation they could offer a grieving mother. She'd never believed it, not really. Her daughter wouldn't abandon her, not after everything they'd been through together. Melissa knew what it meant to be raised by a single mother, knew the sacrifices Linda had made, but 12 years of silence had worn down even her stubborn hope. She'd begun to make a fragile peace with the idea that perhaps her daughter had chosen a new life over their old one. Now, with this discovery, that carefully constructed peace crumbled like wet sand. The sight that greeted her at the park made her breath catch. Multiple police vehicles crowded the parking lot, their lights creating a kaleidoscope of red and blue against the morning sky. Rescue authority vehicles added to the controlled chaos. Park rangers directed traffic while officers cordoned off sections with yellow tape. Linda parked hastily and stepped out on unsteady legs. A crowd had gathered: park employees, curious tourists, officials in various uniforms, but her eyes were drawn to the flatbed trailer at the center of it all. There it sat, the yellow Ford Thunderbird. Streams of murky water still dripped from its undercarriage. Algae and mud caked its once pristine surface, and the windows were opaque with sediment. But even through 12 years of submersion, she recognized it. Gregory Whitmore had made such a production of gifting it to Brandon for their wedding, insisting on photos with the happy couple beside it. "Mrs. Carroll," Detective Prome approached. his weathered face grave. He was younger than she'd expected from his phone. Voice perhaps early 40s, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much human misery. Detective, she couldn't take her eyes off the car. How did you find it after all this time? Let me introduce you to some people who can explain better than I can. He led her to a cluster of young people in University of Miami shirts. They looked barely older than Melissa had been when she disappeared. A young man with sandy hair and earnest eyes stepped forward. Mrs. Carroll, I'm Jake Morrison. We're environmental studies students working on a project about land transformation in the Everglades. We've been analyzing historical satellite imagery to track changes over the decades. He pulled out a folder and extracted a grainy photograph. We were studying land loss patterns when we noticed this anomaly in a 1985 satellite image. He pointed to a section of the photo where Linda could just make out a yellow shape partially visible in dark water. When we enhanced and zoomed the image, we could clearly see it was a vehicle. Our professor recognized it might be connected to the old missing persons case from that year. It was big news back then. So we calculated the coordinates and contacted the police. Detective Prom took over. The area where they spotted it is remote enough to have avoided detection all these years. The water depth there is significant, deep enough for a car to sink completely. Over time, it settled to the bottom. The recovery operation took 4 hours, the detective continued. The Marine Recovery Team worked with Florida Fish and Wildlife and our department. We used sonar equipment and divers to confirm the car's exact position, then brought in a police boat to reach the location. A helicopter lifted it out and placed it on the flatbed for transport. Linda heard car doors slam behind her. She turned to see the Whitmore family arriving. Gregory leading the way with his characteristic swagger despite his advancing years. Eleanor following with her perpetual air of long-suffering dignity, and Daniel bringing up the rear. The years had changed them all, but she recognized them instantly. The old anger flared in her chest. She remembered their last interaction to quell Gregory's accusations. His insistence that her low-income daughter had led his precious son astray, as if love could be measured by bank accounts. Detective Prom excused himself to brief the witness. Linda watched Gregory's face as he examined the vehicle, saw the moment of recognition despite his attempt at stoic control. Yes, that's the Thunderbird I bought Brandon as a wedding gift, Gregory confirmed, his voice carrying clearly across. The lot, the license plate, matches FTB1985. I had it specially requested. Linda approached despite her better judgment. What did you recover from inside? The detective's expression grew more somber. No remains were found. No blood, evidence, or signs of struggle that we could detect, given the water damage. The only item we recovered was this. He signaled to an officer, who brought over an evidence bag, containing a silver lighter. Gregory fished in his pocket and produced an identical lighter. This is mine. That one must be Brandon's. We bought them together. At that shop in Miami, Christmas, 1984. Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. Detective, what does this mean? If they're not in the car, where are they? What happens now? Mrs. Whitmore, I don't believe your son and daughter-in-law would deliberately dispose of their vehicle in the Everglades, especially not a wedding gift. Someone did this to them in 1985 and tried to eliminate evidence. This is no longer just a missing persons case. It's potentially a criminal investigation. Criminal. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat. You mean someone might have killed them? We're exploring all possibilities. But whoever did this knew the area well, knew exactly where the deep water was, how to access this remote location. This suggests someone local. Gregory's face flushed red. Before you waste taxpayer money on wild theories, you need to send divers back out there. Search for bodies, they might still be underwater. Our dive teams are conducting searches as we speak, Mr. Whitmore. We'll expand the grid pattern if necessary. Gregory turned abruptly to Daniel, his voice dropping but still audible to those nearby. This is why it's important to never marry into desperation. Poor girls will ruin your name or destroy you, just like what happened to your brother, Dad. Daniel's shock was evident. You know how much Brandon loved Melissa. She would never live. Control snapped. Are you still trying to blame my daughter after all these years? Gregory rounded on her. She might have had connections, old boyfriends, gang members from her neighborhood. Someone who got jealous and decided to eliminate my son. Gang members. Linda's voice rose. If my daughter just wanted your money, she wouldn't have disappeared with your son. She would have stayed to collect it. Don't you dare, Gregory stepped forward aggressively. Your son is the one who lured her away from her purity promise. Linda shot back. She wanted to wait until marriage, but he convinced her otherwise. That's why they had to marry so young. Melissa was only 24. The argument escalated rapidly. Voices rising, accusations flying. Other visitors stopped to stare. Officers moved to intervene, creating a barrier between the feuding families. That's enough. Detective Prom's authoritative voice cut through the chaos. This behavior helps no one. You're both grieving, both confused. I understand that, but throwing accusations won't bring answers. He guided Linda away from the confrontation. Mrs. Carroll, please. Everyone's emotions are running high. Don't let him provoke you. He's painting my daughter as some kind of criminal, Linda said, her voice shaking with rage and unshed tears. My baby girl who sang in the church choir, who volunteered at the food bank. I know we'll review everything back at the station. For now, I need you to go home and try to rest. I'll contact you immediately if there are any developments. Can you drive yourself, or would you like an officer to escort you? Linda took several deep breaths, trying to center herself. I can drive. I just ... I need a moment. She walked to her car on unsteady legs, slumping into the driver's seat. Through her windshield, she could see the Whitmores still clustered around the flatbed trailer. Gregory gesticulating wildly as he spoke to the officers. The sight of him, still so arrogant, still so certain of his own righteousness, made her stomach turn. She turned the key in the ignition and pulled out of the lot, leaving the circus behind. But she couldn't leave behind the image of that water-stained yellow car, or the questions it raised about what really happened on that long ago summer day. Linda's house felt impossibly quiet as she closed the front door behind her. The adrenaline from the morning's confrontation drained away, leaving her feeling hollow and shaky. She stood in her small living room for a moment, trying to process everything that had happened: the car, the Everglades, Gregory's accusations. Almost without conscious thought, her feet carried her down the narrow hallway to Melissa's room. She hadn't been inside for months, couldn't bear it most days. The door creaked as she pushed it open, and a musty smell immediately assaulted her nostrils. 12 years of neglect had taken their toll. Dust particles danced in the afternoon, sunlight streaming through yellowed curtains. The cheerful floral wallpaper she and Melissa had picked out together was now faded and peeling at the corners. Everything remained exactly as Melissa had left it that June morning in 1985, makeup scattered on the dresser. A romance novel face down. On the nightstand, her favorite sundress draped over the desk chair. But time had not been kind to these abandoned treasures. The clothes in the open closet were spotted with mold, the fabric degraded and discolored. The stuffed animals on the bed were matted with dust, their button eyes dull. "Oh, baby girl," Linda whispered, her throat tight. She threw open the windows, letting fresh air chase away the staleness, then fetched cleaning supplies and cardboard boxes from the garage. If the police were reopening the investigation, they might need to examine Melissa's belongings, and perhaps it was time to finally pack away these physical reminders of her loss. She started with the closet, carefully removing each item. Her hands shook as she folded Melissa's high school graduation dress, remembering how proud her daughter had looked walking across that stage. Each piece of clothing carried memories: the blouse Melissa wore on her first date with Brandon, the skirt she'd saved up for months to buy as she cleared the top shelf. Her hands encountered items that didn't belong to Melissa: a man's watch, a University of Miami sweater in size large, a cologne bottle, Brandon's things. Linda's jaw tightened. She'd known he stayed over sometimes, despite her objections. She'd raised Melissa with strong values, insisted on purity before marriage. But young love had its own rules, and Brandon Whitmore had been very persuasive, handsome, charming, from a wealthy family. He'd swept Melissa off her feet, and looked where it had led them. Linda fetched another box and began packing Brandon's belongings. Separately, a few shirts, some cassette tapes, a tennis racket, various toiletries. She labeled the box clearly: Brandon Whitmore, personal items. The cleaning took nearly 3 hours. By the time she finished, her back ached and her hands were raw from scrubbing, but Melissa's room looked better. Still a shrine to a missing daughter, but a clean one. The boxes stood stacked against the wall, each one carefully labeled and sealed. Linda loaded Brandon's box into her Honda and sat behind the wheel for a moment, debating. The Whitmores lived in the exclusive Gables Estates area, a world away. From her modest neighborhood, she wasn't sure they'd even be home after the morning's events. But they had household staff who could accept the delivery. The drive took 20 minutes. The houses grew larger and the lawns more manicured with each passing block. The Whitmore estate sat behind an imposing iron gate, tall, Mediterranean-style stucco and terracotta tiles. Linda parked just outside and retrieved the box. She'd barely stepped out when Gregory emerged from the garage, apparently heading to his Mercedes. His face darkened the instant he saw her. "What the hell are you doing here?" His voice carried across the driveway. "You're blocking the gate. I'm leaving, and you need to leave too. You're not welcome on this property." Linda held up the box. "I'm just returning Brandon's belongings. They were in Melissa's room." "Then leave it there." He gestured dismissively at the ground. "Someone will deal with it. Now move your pathetic car." Fighting the urge to throw the box at his head, Linda set it carefully on the driveway. She returned to her car and pulled forward, allowing Gregory's Mercedes to reverse past her. He lowered his window as he passed. "I'm leaving shortly, but when I return, I don't want to see you or your piece of junk car anywhere near my property." "Understood." Without waiting for a response, he sped off. Linda sat in her car, hands gripping the steering wheel, taking deep breaths. Through her windshield, she could see the box sitting abandoned on the pristine driveway. It bothered her, leaving Brandon's things like unwanted garbage. Making a quick decision, she got out again and retrieved the box. She walked to the front door and rang the bell. Daniel answered, looking surprised. "Mrs. Carroll, I'm sorry to bother you." She held out the box. "These are Brandon's things." I just wanted to make sure someone actually received them. I'll go now. I don't want to cause trouble, actually. Daniel stepped aside. Mum and I were just going through Brandon's room ourselves. There's something you should see. Please, come in. Your father warned me to be gone before he returns. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. Don't worry about him, please. Against her better judgment, Linda followed him inside. The house was even more impressive than she remembered. Floors, vaulted ceilings, expensive artwork on every wall. Daniel led her up a curved staircase to Brandon's room. Eleanor looked up from where she knelt beside a box, her usual composed expression softening when she saw Linda. Linda, thank you for bringing Brandon's things. Of course. Linda set the box down, noticing several others already packed and labeled. I see you're doing the same thing I did today. It seemed like time, Eleanor said quietly, especially after this morning. Linda noticed a smaller box filled with items she recognized: Melissa's hairbrush, some jewelry, a few books. I'll take her things with me. Thank you for keeping them, Linda. Daniel interrupted, picking up an ornate velvet box from Brandon's desk. This is what we wanted to show you. Linda accepted the box, noting its expensive weight. Inside, nestled in white satin, lay a lingerie set black lace, clearly costly. A small card was tucked into the lid. From Otis, written in bold masculine handwriting. Otis. Linda looked up, puzzled. I don't know anyone named Otis. Melissa never mentioned. Neither do we, Eleanor said. That's why we thought you might. No. We found it in Brandon's closet, hidden behind some shoes. They stared at the intimate gift, all thinking the same troubling thoughts. If someone named Otis had given this to Melissa, why did Brandon have it? Had he intercepted it? Had Melissa shown it to him? The lingerie is brand new, Daniel observed, pointing to the tags. Never worn. Still has the price tag $200. That was expensive, even for 1985. Why would Brandon keep this? Linda asked. If some other man was sending my daughter gifts like this. That's what we can't understand, Eleanor said. Brandon was the jealous type. He would have confronted this Otis person, not hidden evidence in his closet. Linda closed the box decisively. We need to take this to Detective Prom. This could be important. I agree, Daniel said. I'll come with you to the police station. Eleanor nodded. I'll stay here in case Gregory returns. He won't be pleased about this, but the police need to know. Linda gathered the box with Melissa's belongings, while Daniel carefully placed the velvet box in a bag. As they prepared to leave, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious Otis, whoever he was, might hold the key to understanding what happened that summer. 12 years ago, they walked out of the house toward the garage, Daniel leading the way. The Whitmore garage was more like a showroom, climate-controlled, spotlessly clean, with spaces for 6 vehicles. Daniel's silver BMW sat in the third bay, and he'd already pulled out his keys when they heard the distinctive rumble of Gregory's Mercedes pulling into the driveway. Linda's stomach dropped. Your father's back already. It's fine, Daniel said, but his jaw had tightened. Gregory was out of his car before the engine fully died, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is she still doing here? Daniel, what are you doing with this? Woman, Dad, calm down. We found something important in Brandon's room. Daniel held up the bag containing the velvet box. Mum and I were packing his things,